Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. So I just want to do a quick little update video on some of the things that are going on with the channel. And then I wanted to do a little quick talk about annuals versus perennials. And, you know, one of them's not better than the others, but most people go like all annuals. And I want to show you some of the benefits of growing perennials, besides just their, plant once and forget type of thing, which is probably the biggest thing. But there are also many other reasons why you want to plant perennials. One thing I'm also going to do in this episode is I'm going to add in two more propagation methods, softwood and hardwood cuttings. It's really one propagation method. I should have mentioned it because I've done it. I can talk about it. I know success chance of it. I can show you actual plants that are working, and consider it an addendum to the propagation video that I did just the other day. So first up, I just want to thank everybody who submitted viewer vids so far. They're really, really good. I've really enjoyed actually watching some of your stuff. I think it's going to be a wonderful video. I hope people watch it and I hope people enjoy it, because it's kind of, you know, when you see someone commenting, you get to see their space and what they're doing with it. And I think that's really fun. I think it's great for community building. Just one little thing that if I could ask if people do. So obviously keep your clips to, instead of 30 seconds, we'll say a minute. So keep it to a minute, because 30 seconds is really tight and there's so much to show and everyone's got so much passion for their gardens, and I want that to come out. I don't want it to be too rushed. So dogs are playing. So keep it to a minute if you can. But the other thing is don't shoot it in, portrait style. Turn your phone sideways, shoot it in landscape, because when I put it on a YouTube video and it's in portrait, it'll really squish the view and you won't be able to see very much. So if you've already submitted videos in portrait to me, you can redo them if you want. You don't need to. You can submit another one later on. I might try to do a couple of these in the season, so maybe I'll do a spring, summer, and fall series of these if they're really popular and people enjoy it. So I might do that. But when you do shoot your videos, try to shoot them in landscape. Turn your phone sideways so that it's long, on the horizontal. Okay, so then I did want to also talk about the meet and greet, the meetup that we're trying to plan. The timing obviously was terrible to announce that, and then cases started going, into the 3,000 range for Ontario, and the big lockdowns are happening, and we have these variants that are really spreading quick. But at the same time, we're vaccinating a ton of people. So obviously, for the meetup, if COVID is a big issue, we're obviously not going to do it. We're going to need to wait till lockdowns are up. And I want everybody who's going there to feel safe. So it might just mean that we have to push the meetup until later in the season, but we'll do our best to get it done at some point, even if it's in the fall. It might be in the spring or summer, but so just stay tuned, and we'll just figure out how COVID is going and if we're going to do a meetup at all, and hopefully we can make it happen. But just stay tuned on that. So one thing I don't do often is ask you guys to hit that like and subscribe button, because I typically find it a little annoying. The thing is it works. I mean, that's just how the algorithm works. So if you enjoy the video content, if you've gotten anything useful out of my videos, please just smash that like button on every video that you see, and it'll get the videos out to more people and help grow the channel. It really makes a big difference. And if you want to support more than that, there's the membership program down below. Okay, now yesterday's video, I actually want to do a little add-on to it. I didn't mention softwood and hardwood cuttings in that video, and I didn't mention grafting. But I'm going to talk about softwood and hardwood cuttings right now. So this is basically where you take prunings off your tree, and then you'll get, branches left over. And you can actually subdivide those out and then plant them in the ground. And if they're touching soil, they'll typically root into it. Now there's a couple ways you can maximize that, so we'll talk about that really quick. Okay, so when you're pruning your branches, you'll basically, cut something like this off, and then you'll have this branch as, a waste product of the pruning. What you can do is look for the areas where it's new growth from the last year. So this year would be, for example, new growth from last year. this branch here would be, you know, at least another year old, and you can kind of tell by the wood color and the pliability of the wood as well. And what you want to do is basically, ideally, right where they connect, you want to make a cut, and you want to create like a little T here, and the rest of the branch you leave, and then you keep a little T. This is kind of called a heel, and then you'll plant this in the ground. You can some people scarify it, so it basically just slice into the cambium a little bit, and if there's any leaves, you can pull them off. Okay, so here we are at an elderberry. This is an elderberry where I did some pruning last year, and then I plugged all the cuts. And I actually got like 80 to 90%, probably closer to 90+% success rate on all of these. And I'm showing you the host plant where I got all these cuts from, so you can kind of see, you know, what it looks like. It's currently starting to bloom out. And then we'll go see if we can find some of the cuttings from last year and how they're doing. We're in the box garden, the veggie garden in the backyard right now, and on the north side of this, because it's a pretty low value spot, under the cedar tree, I just plugged a bunch of cuttings in, and you'll see right there we've got one that did really well. So this one is going to pop up no problem. Okay, now here's another cutting, and sometimes they'll do something similar to this where you think they died and they look pretty dead and dry, and if I actually scratch this, it's actually dead, fully dead. It's actually kind of slimy and decomposing. But what's actually interesting is the roots didn't die. So if you see right here and right here, we've got two new shoots coming up. Especially, you know, if you look at the type of leaves and how it looks, you can tell that that is actually elderberry coming up. So even though this died over the winter time, the roots under the ground lived, and it'll shoot some fresh branches up, and I'll actually get a new elderberry plant from here. So if this died, don't go digging them out and yanking them out. Just leave them, because you never know what the condition of the roots are under the ground. Okay, so here's one that actually didn't survive, didn't make it. Actually, look at that. It did survive. So this one is actually sending roots up. So a node under the ground actually survived on this one, and it should actually make a new elderberry plant as well. Now, I also remember plugging some into this garden where we're going to do the veggies this year. This is in the backyard. Oh, there's one there. Okay, so this one here, right, mulched with a soccer ball, that one's doing really well, clearly. But again, if you look at the actual plug, it doesn't look like it's survived, but the roots underground did survive. And there's actually one right here next to it. And this one did really well as well. So these ones are going to totally live. And this is a nice sunnier spot, so this could be one of the reasons why they did well. Now, to be honest, I can't tell you where I put half of that stuff. It was such a low effort thing. I literally just plugged it around the whole entire yard, anywhere that I thought, hey, it'd be cool to have a bush there. So I'm gonna have tons of surprises coming up over the next couple years where I'm gonna have forgotten where I put something, and the bush will kind of quietly grow in the background of my life, and then it'll pop its head up to the point where I'll notice it, and then I'll have like an elderberry bush that I had for free. So if you're taking prunings, you know, you can put it in the compost, you can shred them, you can chip them up, but I mean, why not just cut them into little segments of like 4 buds or so, jam 2 or 3 of the buds underground to root, and then the other bud above ground. But just take all those pluggings and jam them in. Okay, so it's the next day, and I'm actually gonna, I've rewatched the video, I'm gonna edit this in. I wanna show you doing it. It's one thing to just talk about it. I think you really need to see it, so I'm just gonna splice in this little clip. The hardwood propagation video section was a little longer than I was hoping for, but there's a lot of good information in there. So if you're not interested in this at all, skip forward to the perennials part. Don't miss that. It's like a separate video all on its own. But let's actually physically do this so you can see what it's like. Okay, so this is the elderberry I think we're going to take a cutting from, and it doesn't really need to be pruned that much. What I'm going to be looking for is an inside growing branch. So right about here, there's a branch that comes up, this one here, and it doesn't really do much. It's growing on the inside of the bush. It's got, you know, this branch here. It's got this branch here that's just growing straight up into the middle of the bush. It's coming inside and going up to the middle, so it's a good candidate to pull. Okay, so we're actually going to cut it right at ground level, actually. So we're going to cut this right out. Okay, so now what I'm going to try to do is make little cuts where I have roughly, you know, 4 to 6 inches in length for each cut, and maybe at least 2 or 3 buds. And I want the thickness to at least be the thickness of a pencil. So anything thin like this, I'm not even going to use. So I might just take the tops of all of these branches off. I'm not even going to use them. So we'll cut those off. So what we're going to do here is try to just maximize each cut. Okay, so this is what I meant by making a little heel. So we'll cut this off and we'll cut this off. And then what we'll do actually is cut the little bottom piece of it off as well. And anywhere that it's cut like this, it should, this kind of scarring or cut will help root it. You can also take a knife or something and just scar up parts of the side, and it'll just, this will act as like little rooting centers. And then we want it, say, roughly this size here. So elderberry is a bit strange because the leaves are so far apart. Like the nodes are actually quite far apart. Like a typical fruit tree will have many nodes up here. So this is basically our cutting, like that. And then we'll go jam that into the ground. We'll make a few more cuttings. Now, if you don't have a heel, that's also okay. So if you don't have a heel, like this piece here, what we'll do is we'll cut that off, and we'll use all of this. We'll use it all. We'll try to jam it in some soft ground. And if you don't have a heel, cut it on a nice little angle just below one of the nodes, and that'll kind of help it drive into the ground. So we'll cut it at a bit of an angle. That'll help us push it in, and then we'll just take the blades and we'll just kind of scar the side a bit. And this is optional, you don't have to really do that. And then what else do we have? You know, this isn't an ideal cutting, but we'll use it. Like I said, might as well use anything you can. So we'll do that. There's no node at the top, so there's nowhere for it to leaf out, but it might make roots and then pop up next year, kind of like those other ones did. This one here, same thing. The nodes are really far apart, so we'll just put a nice angle on that. Help drive that one in, but it's a nice thick cutting, so who knows, that might root as well. And then the rest of this stuff is all pretty small. Well, whatever. We'll jam this one in as well. And one more. So we'll make another heel here. And then we'll scar the side a bit. You just kind of want to be a little gentle with it. Like, you don't want to cut through the cambium, you just want to kind of scar it up. And that's pretty much it. That one might be a bit long. Like, I don't like them this long, but elderberry is just weird. So I would normally want them, you know, roughly this long for most trees. But elderberry is just really strange that the buds are so far apart. So we're on this swale now where we've got the comfrey wall preventing the grasses from creeping in. And I think we've got the top of this swale planted out, but we can kind of interspace in between that stuff down in front a little bit and probably squeeze another plant in. Plus, these may or may not survive, so let's just put these here. And I'll show you how easy that is. It is literally, am I on screen? It's literally as easy as this. Done. And that's it. So there we go. And typically you want a bud above ground. This one only had one bud at the bottom. So we'll do another one and I'll show you one bud above ground at the very minimum, ideally. Okay, now these ones here with the heel, typically you want to kind of use some kind of pencil or something, a stick, to help drive it through. So I have this one cutting I took that has no buds at all, so I'll kind of use that as my driving pole. We'll get on screen. So we'll drive that in the ground, and then we'll drive this in there. And we want to try not to damage the buds if we can. Go a little deeper. They're really hard to drive in, obviously, with that heel. So that's good enough. And then we want to kind of push it and get that soil contact up against the root cutting, because we don't want to make a big hole and then put the root cutting in and then it's surrounded by air, because that's not good. And we'll just jam this other one right in next to it. Why not? It's that easy. You gotta go slow and only push really close to the ground when you start getting deeper, or else you'll crack the cutting. Okay, so now in the video I talk about some of the theory behind how to maximize it. Again, if you want to skip forward to the perennial stuff, go down, check out the timestamp, and you can skip forward to it for about 5 minutes long, talking about ways you can use the science of plants to maximize the rooting of these cuttings before you put them in the ground. You can take the cuttings, root them, and then instead of jamming them in the ground, you actually just plant them like a normal tree, because they'll actually have an established root system. Now, you can take it to the next level with that as well. You can, if you have willows around, you can take willow bark and young branches and you can boil it and then let them steep in the water all night for like 24 hours. They have a compound called salicylic acid in it, and it's what's used as rooting hormone. It's why willows root so easily. You can take willow plugging cuttings and just plug them in the ground. They'll do really well because they themselves have the salicylic acid. So you can take those cuttings, you can make rooting water with it, and then soak your cuttings in that water for maybe about 8 to 12 hours or so, just to get that salicylic acid in the cuttings, and then you can plug the cuttings into the ground. The other thing you can do is the cutting will actually survive or not based on how well it holds water. So you can prevent the evaporation of the water in the cutting by just on that cutting surface rubbing some beeswax, or painting it, put a little thing of tape across it, whatever you can manage to help keep the moisture inside that wood. For those, I just plug. I wanted to see if that worked first, and it worked really well, especially for elderberries and for currants. The next thing you can do to kind of next level your success chance for that kind of stuff is they will root better when they're warmer. So not hot, but roughly around 80 degrees. So the roots will grow fastest at 80 degrees, but also at 80 degrees the plants kind of wake up out of dormancy, they push leaves out, and as soon as there's leaves up, then you have transpiration happening, which is a water loss from the leaf out to the atmosphere. So the cutting is going to start losing water through transpiration through its leaves. So the way that you maximize the success rate of a cutting like that is you want to keep the soil warm where the roots are, and you want to keep the above area cool as possible. So a great way to do that is to create a little raised bed style container in your garage or your basement if you have a cool basement. And then you want to warm the soil as much as you can, whether you're using a heat mat. Some people wind, a heated coil. Be really careful you don't set fire to something. But if you cover it in sand and that kind of stuff, there's almost no chance of any kind of fire happening. And it's not going to be super hot. So just try to keep the soil around and measure the temperature of the soil, because you want to keep it around, roughly between 72 Fahrenheit and like 80, in that ballpark area. Too hot, you'll kill the roots and dry the root cutting out. And then too cold, and you're just not going to get the benefit of, heating it up like you wanted. So try to see if you can do that. If you want to maximize the chance of your cuttings, keep the soil warm, but the above area atmosphere cool, so that you're slowing down when that plant wants to come out of dormancy and push leaves out. The longer you can keep it as a dormant stick in warm soil, the better roots you're going to get, and the more moisture you're going to retain in that cutting. So don't let the cuttings dry out. Don't soak them and have the roots basically drown in water and not get oxygen. So a nice kind of porous media to grow in is perfect. You don't need a ton of nutrients. You're not starting a baby plant from seed. You just need a media that the roots will grow into. And then, the plant will kind of consume nutrients that it has inside the root in order to push leaves out. That's kind of just what they do. That's like kind of how potatoes work, right? You put a potato in the ground, it uses the starches in the potato to grow the next plant. So the plants will kind of react in the similar way. They'll take nutrients in the cutting to try to grow some leaves. So you don't need a nutrient-rich potting media. You just need something that drains well, that holds heat but doesn't get too hot, that kind of thing. Anything will work. Sand is a really good thing. Maybe perlite sand mixture, and maybe just like a native soil perlite sand mix. So you can do something like that. But that all being said, always try the easy way first, because why jump through all those hoops if you don't need to? So for example, I'm never going to take cuttings of elderberry and currants and baby them in a method like that, because I can literally just prune them and stick them in the ground and they'll propagate. I won't get 100% success rate, but per unit of my time, it's a really high success rate, and it's a waste product anyway. If you only have one plant and you need to baby and protect each one of those little branches, and you need to get maximum, rooting out of them, okay, then do the babying method. But if you have a bunch of plants and you don't really care about percentage of success, but more how much time are you doing, how much time of your life is it sucking out to do these propagations, maybe it's better to just take a lower success chance and just plug them in the ground everywhere. 5 minutes and you're done. Now, I mentioned softwood cuttings and hardwood cuttings. The method is the exact same. The only difference is the age of the wood. So for a softwood cutting, it'll be green growth from that year, which works really good for bushes like blueberries, for example. Is a great way to do blueberry cuttings and propagate your blueberries. And then typically for trees, you're going to need to go to the hardwood cuttings, because I think the softwood cuttings just dry out too quick, and the tree is a slower rooter, so it won't root and establish the roots it needs before the softwood cutting dries out. The hardwood cutting's a little bigger, less transpiration losses. It'll be a slower rooting, but it will be more successful because it'll hold on to its moisture for longer. So for trees, you want to do hardwood cuttings typically. Just a general rule of thumb. For bushes, you want to do softwood cuttings. So maybe the best part about perennials is that once you do the work, that's it. So they just pop up. You're eating before other people are even planting their plants. So we'll go take a look at some of those things I have, and then we'll also talk about some of the things I'm adding to the food forest and the pond this year based on user recommendations and research that I've done on, getting more perennial greens into the system. So as far as adding new things this year, we've been propagating some of our kale just in further areas all around the garden. And we're also adding Good King Henry, we're adding sorrel, we're adding Hablitzia, and a few others that I can't quite remember. But the goal is to get as many leafy greens going into the food forest as I can. And then to supplement those with, quote, air quote, weeds that grow naturally. So we have a lot of lamb's quarters. In fact, when I did my seedlings for my tomatoes, I took some leaf mold from outside, and obviously there's going to be seeds in there, and a whole bunch of lamb quarter germinated. So I know I'm going to have big swaths of lamb's quarters again this year, which is fantastic. Probably my favorite green of all greens on the planet. So good. So pest free, nothing really bothers it, and it's very, very healthy also. I don't know why more people don't eat lamb's quarters. I'm going to do a video this year for my love of lamb's quarters, so stick around for that one. And also right down there and around the corner, we have a huge patch of nettles down near the stream. And nettles are another fantastic perennial that'll just keep coming up and up. And you can't really eat them raw because they got the whole stinging nettle needle there. But you cook it up kind of like a spinach, and it's very nutritious as well and quite tasty. This is our kitchen garden for this year, and I've kind of been planning out how I'm gonna plant this out. And what I didn't take into account is how much of the kale, this is red Russian perennial kale, would come back. So this is kale that I planted for the bunnies, so that they would maybe eat this instead of my fruit trees and bushes. And it ended up looking like this at the end of the year. But now, if we see what's going on, is it's regrowing. So I can already be pulling kale out of my gardens. Part of our ground is frozen, but I can be eating kale already. Most gardens around here are actually still just bare dirt squares that no one's even planted anything in. Our planting date is usually sometime around May 24th. People will put kales out maybe 2 or 3 weeks before that, but maybe even 4 weeks for the adventurous. But here we are 6 weeks before that, and I can already be eating kale. Most onions aren't even going in the ground for, maybe a couple weeks. And if you're starting seed onions, you can put them out kind of now, but they're totally flimsy. I can already be taking greens off of these Egyptian walking onions and putting them in salads. And the ground's still got frost in it. Parts of it is still frozen. You got perennial herbs like sage are really good to add. Chives are really good to add. There's so many more plants that I could add to this list, like asparagus. I'm actually adding new perennial plants every single year. So maybe in a year or two, I'll do a really comprehensive video on all the new things that I've added. Thanks for all the awesome suggestions. A lot of people will say, hey, have you tried this? Have you heard of this? I really appreciate that kind of stuff. Sometimes finding it is a little bit harder, but I have a whole bunch of seeds that came from perennial nitrogen fixing bushes that I'd never heard of before, that I'm adding into the food forest. So I'm really excited about all that stuff. I will do a video on that in the future. Thanks for watching. I know this was a nice long one. A lot of people were asking about hardwood cutting, so I wanted to get that done. But at the same time, in the morning, I was going around looking at all the perennials popping up thinking, this is the way to do it. These perennials, I didn't even plant any of this stuff, and my food forest is coming to life right now, There's so much food growing that I never have to plant again. That's kind of what this is all about. So always, if you can, grow your tomatoes and all those annuals, they're wonderful, but when you can, find a perennial option for things, try them out, and if they're good, grow them. I don't need to grow onions anymore. I have as many as I could ever want. I don't need to grow garlic anymore. I have as many as I ever want. And look for annuals, look for self-seeding annuals. Lamb's quarter is an annual, but it seeds so readily, I probably never have to plant lamb's quarters. I'm always going to have it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you're watching this from an apartment building or your parents' house or whatever, try to find a way to make this happen. You know, there's no rush on it. Just get there. Get there somehow, and make every choice and decision that you make in your life get you here, where you have a little bit of land to plant some fruit trees and grow some perennial gardens and a food forest on. You know, make it a priority in your life and it'll happen. Just make every choice in your life conscious and leading towards the eventual goal that you want to reach. See you on the next one.